The impossible problem, the warning klaxons of Research Station Nexus Prime screamed across 17 different alien languages. But they all meant the same thing. Death was coming, and it was coming fast. Dr. Vexhari pressed her 6 crystalline hands against the main control console, her translucent blue body flickering with stress patterns that had not been seen in her species for over 1,000 years. Around her, the galaxy's finest scientific minds worked with desperate efficiency, their various appendages dancing over holographic displays that showed readings no one wanted to believe. The station's quantum energy core, a marvel of engineering that had taken 5 different species 30 years to perfect, was experiencing what the computers politely called a cascading resonance failure. What it really meant was that in less than 4 hours, the core would explode with enough force to sterilize 3 solar systems. Status report. Commander Thorne's metallic voice cut through the chaos. The 7-foot-tall android's optical sensors swept across the command center, analyzing everything simultaneously. His mechanical mind could process data faster than any organic brain, but even he seemed overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis. Core temperature rising beyond all safety parameters, reported Dr. Zilnax, a tentacled being whose species had mastered energy manipulation when humans were still discovering fire. The quantum field generators are destabilizing. We've tried every protocol, every emergency procedure. Nothing works. Vexhari's crystal body pulsed with frustrated energy. The Nexus Prime Station was her life's work, a symbol of interspecies cooperation and scientific achievement. Representatives from 47 different worlds worked here, pushing the boundaries of physics and exploring the mysteries of the universe. The station's energy core was supposed to be foolproof, protected by 17 different safety systems and monitored by the most advanced artificial intelligences in the galaxy. What about the emergency shutdown sequences? Asked Dr. Krell, a reptilian scientist whose green scales were now pale with fear. All failed, Zilnax replied, his tentacles writhing with distress. The quantum matrices won't respond to any commands. It's as if the core has developed its own intelligence and decided to destroy itself. The truth was worse than that. The core hadn't just malfunctioned. It had encountered a problem that none of their advanced technology could solve. The quantum field that powered the entire station was caught in a feedback loop that grew stronger with every attempt to shut it down. The more energy they applied to the problem, the worse it became. Commander Thorne's sensors detected elevated stress levels throughout the command center. Fear had a distinctive bioelectric signature, and right now it was off the charts. These beings represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization, yet they were helpless against a problem that defied all their understanding. Sir, a small, mouse-like alien squeaked from her station near the back of the room. There is one more option we haven't tried. The command center fell silent except for the ominous humming coming from the core chamber below. Everyone turned to look at Ensign Pip, a junior systems analyst whose species was known for their attention to detail. Speak, Vexhari commanded, her crystalline voice sharp with desperation. There's a human on the station. Jake Sullivan. He works in the maintenance department. He's been here for 3 years, keeping the old backup systems running. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Several aliens made sounds that roughly translated to snorts of derision. Dr. Krell's scales actually changed color with amusement. A human. Commander Thorne's optical sensors focused on Pip with mechanical precision. The species that still uses combustion engines on their home world. The ones who think hitting things with hammers counts as engineering. They're barely past their industrial age, added Dr. Zilnax, his tentacles coiling with what passed for laughter among his people. What could a human possibly know about quantum field dynamics that we don't? Pip's small voice carried clearly across the command center. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Someone who doesn't think like we do. The station shuddered as another power surge ran through its structure. Emergency lighting flickered, and somewhere, in the distance, they could hear the sound of systems failing. The core temperature had risen another 50 degrees in the past minute. Vexari looked round at her team of brilliant scientists, each one representing hundreds of years of advanced education and research. They had tried everything there combined. Knowledge could suggest. Every solution had failed. Every backup plan had crumbled. Where is this human? She asked. Maintenance Bay 7, sublevel 15, Pip replied quickly. He should be working on the water recycling systems. The irony was not lost on anyone present. While the galaxy's greatest minds struggled with quantum physics, the human was probably fixing a toilet. But with death approaching and their options exhausted, even the impossible seemed worth trying. Bring him here, Vexari ordered. Immediately, as Pip scurried away to fetch Jake Sullivan, the assembled scientists returned to their desperate work. But there was something different in the air now, a mixture of hope and embarrassment. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone with fresh eyes could see something they had missed. Embarrassment that they might need to rely on a species they had always considered primitive. Jake Sullivan was lying on his back under a water filtration unit when Pip found him. The maintenance bay smelled of machine oil and recycled air, a far cry from the sterile perfection of the command center. Tools were scattered across workbenches, many of them simple mechanical devices that would have looked at home in a museum. Mr. Sullivan, Pip's small voice echoed in the cramped space. You need to come with me. Emergency situation. Jake slid out from under the machinery, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had seen better days. He was a big man, built like someone who worked with his hands for a living. His coveralls were stained with the honest dirt of manual labor, and his tool belt held instruments that most aliens would consider laughably primitive. What kind of emergency? Jake asked, grabbing his toolkit. Life support failure? Gravity generator acting up again. The quantum core is going to explode and destroy 3 solar systems. Pip said factly. Doc. Jake paused in the act of closing his toolkit. Well, he said after a moment, that's a new one. I usually just fix leaky pipes and stuck doors. They made their way through the station's corridors, past laboratories filled with equipment Jake couldn't even begin to understand. Aliens of every conceivable shape and size hurried past them, their faces showing the universal expression of barely controlled panic. The station's superstructure groaned around them as another power surge ran through its systems. Just so you know, Jake said as they walked, I'm not exactly qualified for this. My training is in mechanical engineering. I fix things you can hit with a wrench. That's exactly what Dr. Vexari is hoping for, Pip replied. When they reached the command center, Jake felt completely out of place. The room was filled with beings whose technology was so advanced it looked like magic. Holographic displays showed complex mathematical equations that hurt his brain to look at. Energy readings danced across screens in patterns that defied human comprehension. Dr. Vexari turned to face him, her crystalline body towering over his human frame. You are Jake Sullivan, the human maintenance worker. That's me, Jake replied, shifting his toolkit to his other hand. I hear you have a problem with your power source. We have a quantum field resonance cascade that is building toward a critical explosion. Commander Thorne stated with mechanical precision. Our most advanced minds cannot solve it. Ensign Pip suggested we consult someone with a different perspective. Jake looked around at the assembled scientists. He could see the mixture of desperation and skepticism in their alien features. They didn't really expect him to help. Okay, he said, setting down his toolkit. Show me what's happening. For the next 20 minutes, the aliens tried to explain the problem in terms Jake could understand. They talked about quantum fields and energy matrices, about dimensional phase variance and temporal flux calculations. Jake listened carefully, asking simple questions that often made the scientists pause and reconsider their explanations. Finally, Dr. Vexhari gestured toward a massive holographic display that showed the station's power core in real. The core itself was a beautiful thing, a perfect sphere of crystalline material suspended in the center of a complex web of energy conduits and field generators. This is the heart of our problem, she said. The quantum field that powers our station has become unstable. Every time we try to regulate it, the instability grows worse. It's trapped in a feedback loop that we cannot break. Jake studied the display for several long minutes. He didn't understand the quantum physics involved, but he understood systems and energy flow. He had spent 30 years working with machinery, learning to see patterns that others missed. This resonance, he said slowly, when did it start? Approximately 6 hours ago, Dr. Zilnax replied. It began as a minor fluctuation in the lower harmonic frequencies, and you've been trying to fix it. How? We've attempted to stabilize the quantum field using inverse resonance patterns, Vexhari explained. We've tried dampening the oscillations with counter-frequency generators. We've even attempted to completely reset the core matrix. Jake nodded, still studying the display. All electronic solutions, all trying to fight the resonance with more technology. Of course, Commander Thorne said with mechanical certainty. What else would you suggest? Jake opened his toolkit and pulled out something that made several aliens gasp in shock. It was an adjustable wrench, worn smooth by decades of use. The kind of simple tool that had been fixing things since before humans had left Earth. Sometimes, Jake said, hefting the wrench in his hand, the simplest solution is the right one. You're all trying to fight this resonance with more energy, more complexity. But what if the problem isn't electronic at all? What if it's mechanical? The command center fell silent, except for the growing hum of the overloading core. Dr. Vexhari's crystalline body flickered with what Jake had learned was confusion. Mechanical, she asked. This is a quantum energy system. There are no mechanical components. There are always mechanical components, Jake replied. Even your advanced technology has to be held in place somehow. Bolts, clamps, mounting brackets, physical connections that can work loose or shift position. He pointed at the holographic display. Your sensors are looking for quantum problems because that's what you expect to find. But what if one of the field generators has shifted just a millimeter out of alignment? What if a mounting bracket has vibrated loose? Your quantum sensors wouldn't even notice something that simple. The aliens exchanged glances. The idea seemed to offend them on a fundamental level. Their perfect technology couldn't possibly fail, for such a mundane reason. But the station shuddered again, and the core temperature readings climbed higher. They were running out of time and options. Even if that were the case, Dr. Krell said, his scales rippling with skepticism, how would you propose to fix it? The core chamber is flooded with lethal radiation. No organic being can survive in there for more than a few minutes. Jake smiled grimly. Good thing I brought my radiation suit. And besides, he hefted his wrench again. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Mind if I take a look? Part 2. Simple solutions save the day. Simple solutions save the day. The corridor leading to the quantum core chamber felt like walking into the heart of a dying star. Even through his radiation suit's sensors, Jake could feel the raw power bleeding through the station's shielding. The suit itself was a relic by galactic standards, a human-made device that relied on heavy metal plating rather than elegant force fields. The aliens had offered him something more advanced, but Jake preferred equipment he understood completely. Commander Thorne's metallic footsteps echoed behind him as they made their way through increasingly dangerous sections of the station. The android's sensors were recording everything, though whether for scientific analysis or to document Jake's spectacular failure remained to be seen. Radiation levels increasing exponentially, Thorne announced, his mechanical voice unchanged despite the circumstances. At current exposure rates, you will have approximately 8 minutes inside the core chamber before suffering permanent cellular damage. 8 minutes should be plenty, Jake replied, checking his toolkit one more time. Alongside his trusty wrench, he had brought a collection of other simple tools: a socket set, a level, a flashlight that ran on batteries rather than quantum cells. The aliens had watched him pack with expressions that ranged from confusion to outright horror. They reached the core chamber's outer door, a massive barrier of reinforced alloy that was currently sealed under emergency protocols. Dr. Vexhari's voice crackled through the communication system, her crystalline tones tight with stress. Mr. Sullivan, I must protest this course of action. Our finest engineers designed this system. The probability of a simple mechanical failure is less than 1 in 10 million. Doc, Jake said, adjusting his suit's settings. In 30 years of fixing things, I've learned that the universe loves proving engineers wrong. The more impossible you think a failure is, the more likely it is to happen. The core chamber door cycled open with a deep, resonant clang that Jake felt through his bones. Beyond was a space that defied human comprehension, a spherical chamber 50 meters across, with the quantum core floating at its center, like a captive star. Energy field generators ringed the space in perfect geometric patterns, their surfaces gleaming with an inner light that spoke of technology beyond human understanding. But Jake wasn't looking at the advanced technology. He was looking at the mounting brackets that held everything in place, the physical supports that the designers had considered so unimportant they barely appeared on the technical drawings. And there, on the northwestern field generator, he saw exactly what he had expected to find. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered, making his way carefully across the chamber's maintenance walkway. Situation report, Commander Thorne requested, his sensors tracking Jake's every movement. The mounting bracket on field generator 7 has worked loose, Jake called back, shining his flashlight on the problem. Looks like it's shifted about 3 millimeters out of alignment. Not much, but enough to throw off the resonance patterns. There was silence from the command center. Jake could almost hear the alien scientists running calculations, trying to understand how such a simple problem could have escaped their notice. Dr. Vexhari's voice finally came through the comm system, sounding stunned. That's impossible. Our quantum field sensors would have detected any misalignment immediately. Your quantum field sensors were looking for quantum problems, Jake replied, pulling out his wrench. They wouldn't notice something as mundane as a loose bolt. It's like trying to find a missing screw with a telescope. Jake examined the mounting bracket more closely. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, crafted from materials that could withstand temperatures that would vaporize planets. But its heart, it was held in place by the galactic equivalent of nuts and bolts, and those had worked loose from months of tiny vibrations. "I need to realign this generator and tighten the mounting hardware," Jake announced. "But there's a problem. The whole assembly needs to be moved back into position, and it weighs about 3 tons. The chamber is equipped with gravity manipulation fields," Commander Thorne stated. "I can reduce the local gravitational constant to make the generator effectively weightless. Can you do it without interfering with the quantum field?" A pause while Thorne consulted with the command center. "Affirmative. The gravity fields operate on completely different principles." Jake positioned himself at the generator, his wrench ready. "Okay, reduce gravity around generator 7 by 90%. Nice and slow." The effect was immediate and disorienting. The massive piece of equipment suddenly felt light as a feather in Jake's hands. He carefully guided it back into proper alignment, using the level from his toolkit to make sure everything was perfectly positioned. "That's it," he said, feeling the generator settle into place with a satisfying click. "Now I need to tighten these mounting bolts, restore normal gravity on my mark." Jake fit his wrench to the first bolt and braced himself. Mark. Gravity returned, and 3 tons of advanced technology pressed down on the mounting bracket. Jake applied steady pressure with his wrench, feeling the bolt turn with the solid resistance of properly tightened hardware. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3. The bolt seated itself with the kind of mechanical precision that human hands had been perfecting for centuries. He moved to the second bolt, then the third, tightening each one with the careful attention of someone who understood that small things could have enormous consequences. Around him, the quantum field generators hummed with a different tone now, their resonance patterns shifting back toward stability. "Energy readings are stabilizing," Dr. Vexhari's voice carried clear amazement. "The cascade resonance is diminishing." "How is this possible?" "Because sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one," Jake replied, working on the 4th and final bolt. "Your quantum field was perfectly calibrated when this station was built. But over time, normal vibrations loosened this one mounting bracket that threw generator 7 out of alignment by just a few millimeters. But that was enough to create a resonance mismatch that got worse every time you tried to correct it with more energy." He gave the final bolt one last turn and stepped back to admire his work. The generator sat exactly where it was supposed to, aligned with mathematical precision and held in place by hardware that would last for centuries. Core temperature dropping rapidly, Zilnax reported from the command center. All quantum field readings returning to normal parameters. "The crisis appears to be over." Jake made his way back toward the chamber exit, his radiation counter showing that he had completed the job with 2 minutes to spare. Behind him, the quantum core hummed with the steady rhythm of perfect operation, its light casting rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. When he emerged from the core chamber, Jake found the entire command crew waiting for him. Aliens who had barely acknowledged his existence for 3 years now stared at him with expressions ranging from amazement to embarrassment. Dr. Vexhari's crystalline body pulsed with colors Jake had never seen before. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice carrying formal tones of respect. "We all do. We allowed our assumptions about advanced technology to blind us to a simple mechanical problem." Jake pulled off his radiation suit's helmet and wiped sweat from his forehead. Don't worry about it, Doc. Happens to the best of us. Sometimes you get so focused on the complex solutions that you miss the obvious ones. Commander Thorne's optical sensors focused on Jake with new interest. Your approach was ... illuminating. You identified a problem that our most sophisticated instruments could not detect. That's because your instruments were looking in the wrong place, Jake explained, packing away his tools. You were so focused on the quantum level that you forgot about the physical level. But everything in the universe, no matter how advanced, still has to obey basic mechanical principles. Dr. Krell's scales had returned to their normal color, but his voice carried a note of curiosity. How did you know to look for a loose mounting bracket? Jake smiled, remembering countless similar problems from his years of maintenance work. Experience, mostly. When I was a kid working on Earth, I had an old car that developed a mysterious vibration. Took it to 3 different mechanics. Ran all kinds of electronic diagnostics. Nothing worked. Finally, my grandfather took a look at it and found that one of the engine mount bolts had worked loose. 5-minute fix with a wrench. Problem solved. Your grandfather was a mechanic? Ensign Pip asked, her small voice filled with interest. Best one in 3 counties, Jake replied proudly. He taught me that the most sophisticated machine in the universe is still just a collection of parts, held together with nuts and bolts. And nuts and bolts work loose if you don't keep an eye on them. Dr. Vexhari moved closer, her crystalline form reflecting the restored lighting of the command center. We have learned something valuable today. Our technology may be advanced, but we have forgotten the wisdom of simple solutions. Perhaps we should incorporate more mechanical perspectives into our procedures. Couldn't hurt, Jake agreed. And maybe next time you have a problem, you might want to check the simple stuff before you assume it's quantum physics. Commander Thorne's mechanical voice carried what might have been amusement. I am updating our emergency protocols to include manual inspection procedures. It appears that sometimes the most primitive approach is the most effective. Jake laughed, slinging his toolkit over his shoulder. Primitive, maybe, but effective, definitely. My grandfather used to say that if you can't fix it with a wrench and some common sense, it probably doesn't need fixing. As he prepared to return to his maintenance duties, Jake paused and looked around at the assembled alien scientists. You know, you folks aren't the first to learn this lesson. Back on Earth, we had all kinds of advanced fighter jets that wouldn't work right because of loose screws and disconnected wires. Sometimes the most advanced technology fails for the most basic reasons. Dr. Vexhari's body pulsed with thoughtful patterns. We would be honored if you would consider joining our research team permanently. Your unique perspective could prove invaluable. Thanks, but I like my job just fine, Jake replied. Someone's got to keep the toilets working while you folks save the universe. But I'll tell you what, next time you have a problem you can't solve, give me a call. Sometimes all you need is someone who knows which end of a wrench to hold. As Jake walked away from the command center, his footsteps echoing in corridors that no longer hummed with the threat of imminent destruction, he could hear the alien scientists discussing new protocols and procedures. For the first time in galactic history, a research station would include regular mechanical inspections alongside its quantum field analyses. The universe was a complex place, full of wonders beyond human imagination, but at its heart, it still ran on the same basic principles that had guided mechanics and engineers for centuries. Sometimes the most advanced problem had the simplest solution. Sometimes all you needed was a wrench, some common sense, and the willingness to get your hands dirty. And sometimes The grease-stained human in the maintenance bay was exactly what the galaxy needed to keep running. Asterisk.